I will say this. I look at the Carolina Panthers, and I'm a little bit interested in how things are going to play out over the next few years. Because to me, I see an organization that had a quarterback that they drafted, developed, and built around during the past decade in Cam Newton. And while the organization's only been around a little over 25 years, enjoyed their best period of sustained success with Cam Newton at the helm. Like, that was the tried and true formula. It starts with the quarterback, and you build everything else around that. Matt Rule, conversely, seems to be approaching building everything else up and taking the quarterback position a little bit for granted. And time's ultimately going to tell whether or not this approach is the right one. Personally, I find it a little odd, curious. This is a guy that has, a 7-year contract, 6 years, including this year, still remaining. And he's not proactively going out and trying to find his young quarterback of the future. Now, some of you are probably going to point to the Sam Darnold trade and say that's what he's doing here. But is he really? Like, Darnold has some of those skills and some of those tools. But the Jets ultimately moved on from Sam Darnold for a reason. Do you think you have that much confidence in what you can do in Carolina that you can do that much better than what the Jets did with Sam Darnold? And it's also going to be really interesting, too, when you talk about the Panthers, because you look at this year's draft in particular, they at least passed up on the ability to draft Justin Fields or Mac Jones and potentially trade up to get a quarterback or, trade for somebody like a Deshaun Watson. Like, that's the pivotal decision of the organization, what they're going to do with the quarterback position, and they're still really unsettled. And it feels really odd to me that a head coach who has a relative amount of job security coming into a situation where you knew you needed to rebuild, and that's what you were going to do, has instead prioritized the defensive side of the ball. I'm not trying to be immediately dismissive, but it feels like, based off of recent trends and patterns in the NFL, a pretty dumb dick strategy to take on, honestly. Am I wrong? They zig, you zag. They go left, you go right. Maybe it'll pay off, and maybe it will work. But for an organization that devoted their entire 2020 draft to the defensive side of the ball, they turned back around in the first round of this year's draft and took a corner in J.C. Horn, felt really odd. It really, really did. Because offense is the name of the game in the league today. Offense is what will win you championships. Offense is what matters more. And if you're going to say, oh, look at what Tampa did. Yeah, look at what Tampa did. They scored 31 points in 3 quarters in the Super Bowl. Even if their defense was just average in that game against the Chiefs, they were winning, and comfortably, more likely than not. Having a great defensive performance only aided in their abilities to win and win comfortably. It was their offense, make no mistake about it, that made all of the difference. When you can go into the playoffs and you can put up 30-plus points, not too many teams can keep up. Not too many teams are going to beat that. And weirdly, ironically, the Panthers are going in the opposite direction, which is, in particular, feels especially odd to me when you look at the Buccaneers, who have Tom Brady, who's 44 years of age, and Matt Ryan, who's on the wrong side of his mid-30s. And the Saints, now that Drew Brees is retired, Jameis Winston's going to start, but what's he going to be, and is he really the long-term answer there? Well, the Carolina Panthers are in this sixth spot in this circumstance where, to me, if you got the young quarterback in place now, you could position yourself to potentially dominate the division in the years to come. I don't know that the Sam Darnold trade is going to make that happen for you. Now, obviously, they went out in free agency and threw around quite a bit of money on both sides of the ball. Pat Elflein, Cameron Irving, Morgan Fox, Hassan Reddick, A.J. Boye, Dan Arnold, Denzel Perryman, Daquan Jones. Conversely, though, like I look at the offensive side, and why'd you let Curtis Samuel leave? I know you're pretty good at the top two wide receivers with DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. That's a pretty good 1-2 combination. Actually, I think, frankly, a little bit underrated. And if you had better quarterback play, we would hear more about those two guys. But in a league where the passing game is at a premium, where the ability to score points is at a premium, the ability to have explosive plays in your offense, why would you allow Curtis Samuel to leave? And I really don't get that one. Now, certainly getting back a Christian McCaffrey, hopefully healthy through an entire season, is going to help this Panthers offense. But yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how this all plans out for Matt Rule. Now, when I look at this team on paper, I do, as I mentioned, like the wide receiving core, specifically the top two guys in DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson. It's a pretty good 1-2 combination. I think a bit underrated in league circles, especially amongst like league media, NFL media, and fans. They've got a lot of defensive upside. I'll give them that because I've referenced already the heavy investment they've made on the defensive side of the ball. They have 7 starters between their own picks and other teams that are first and second round talents. They were previously drafted in the first or second round. That's a lot of marquee, high upside type of talent on that defense, and 10 of the 11 starters on their defensive unit are age 28 or less. What does that mean? You have a young defense that still has time to come together and gel, and if they can live up to their draft slotting, and they all live up to their potential individually and collectively as a unit, you're probably looking at the Panthers having an elite defense in the league, maybe as soon as 2022, and maybe starting to show some flashes of that here in 2021. And I will give Matt Rule, the head coach, credit for this. His teams were competitive last year. They battled, they fought hard. They weren't that good, but damn it, they were in the mix a lot. They lost 8 games by 8 points or less. A lot of times that's a reflection of the coaching and the preparation. And, if you would say, well, if they were a really good team, that might be a reflection of the coaching in a negative way. I would agree with that because they're not able to get the job done. Flip side of this is when you know that you don't have a great team, you don't have that for sure answer at the quarterback position, you don't have that type of dude there, to be able to stay that close and be that competitive in so many games, that is a positive reflection on the coaching staff. So I think Matt Rule, the coach, doing pretty well. Question mark still about this roster. I look at the defense. Like, you've invested a lot in that defense over the past 2 years in terms of draft pick capital and free agent money as well. But your pass rush, you've got Brian Burns there, but who else do you have that's going to provide a consistent rush, create pressure on opposing quarterbacks? Their run defense, you'd like to see Derek Brown certainly take a big step in year number 2 and show what he can do, show that he was worth the high pick this team put on him last year. I've already talked at kind of ad nauseum about the team construction and just looking at it and saying, what are you trying to do here? What's the identity you're trying to build? And maybe, if this is the 1990s or the early 2000s, that roster construction concept makes perfect sense. But in today's NFL, I really question just how effective it is. And I really question when shit comes to get, that especially if Sam Darnold plays like an average to mid to lower mid type of version of Sam Darnold, like, what's all of that really going to mean? Because you're going to find out a lot about Sam Darnold here. He's got a new opportunity. He's the unquestioned starter here. And he needs to show why he was a former top 3 pick in this league. Some of that could be because GMs made a mistake. That's true, and sometimes it happens. But the reality is he had enough talent that somebody saw something in him, in this case the Jets, that they thought he was worthy of a 3rd overall pick. And it didn't work out so well in New York, and that's why 3 years later he was shipped off and they drafted Zach Wilson. If Sam Darnold comes in and plays more like the quarterback that was envisioned when he was drafted by the Jets, then a lot of what I said about team construction for the Panthers and the approach and the strategy is a moot point. Let's be clear. And he comes into a situation, admittedly, that isn't that bad. A healthy Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore outside as the wide receivers. Like, there are much worse situations for a young quarterback to go into. And even when you think about Darnold having been with the Jets the past few years, this is still a young quarterback. He's only probably, 24 years of age, maybe 25 at most. So there's certainly a pathway to see where he could grow and he could improve and he could become better. And if he does, then maybe the Panthers don't look so questionable for passing on some other quarterbacks. But that's a question mark for me right now. When I look at this team's schedule, like that first half of the schedule, You start off with 2 straight home games against the Jets and the Saints, one of them a divisional game. Both of them you look at and you say the Panthers need to try and win those games. At Houston and at Dallas the next couple of weeks, then a couple more home games against Philly and against Minnesota, and then going to the Giants and to Atlanta. I throw out this schedule here to say this, is that there is certainly the potential here that the Panthers could get off to a really good start. There is 5 wins in there, maybe 6 wins, who knows? And sometimes when you get a team that gets off to a good start, sometimes when you get a team that doesn't know any better, sometimes when you get a team that can buy in and believe in who they are and what they've been doing and they think that's their actual reality, like those teams can continue that momentum and carry it through the second half of the year. But for the Panthers, I look at that first half of the season and I say there are several winnable games on that schedule. Jets, certainly winnable. Saints, same thing. Texans, good God, yes. Dallas maybe is a little bit of a challenge, but Philly's potentially winnable at home. So is Minnesota. The Giants, the Falcons. All 8 of those games are potentially winnable, I want to be clear. But I could really sit there and say 5 or 6 of them, I feel confident that this Panthers team is at least equal, if not slightly better. So there's a chance. And they're going to need to get off to that hot start because as they go later in the year, like the last few weeks of the year, they've got 4 of their last 5 games against divisional opponents. The one non-divisional game is a road game against Buffalo. But you look at it, it's Atlanta, then you go to Buffalo, hosting Tampa, going to New Orleans, going to Tampa. Right? Probably want to build in some cushion if they're thinking about having designs on the playoffs this year because the first half of that schedule, not so bad. Second half of the schedule, particularly the last 5 weeks, ugh. So when it comes time for predictions for the Panthers, I look at them and I think they're going to be improved. I think they're going to be better this year. I'm just not sure how much. Like I said, the one thing that gives me pause of saying, this team could probably be even better than I'm projecting them, while I look at that first half of the season schedule, is saying one injury to Christian McCaffrey and they're in trouble. If Sam Darnold is mid at best, then they're in trouble. But there's an upside play here for this Panthers team. Certainly not unfathomable that this team would finish second in this division. First, in challenging the Bucs might feel like a bit of a stretch. But second, I could certainly see that. For my money, though, I think they finish third in this division. I think they'll finish ahead of the Saints. And you're going to say, well, what about the Falcons? I default to the fact that the Falcons have clearly the second best quarterback in the division, and that does matter over the stretch of now a 17-game season. But I think this Panthers team could win 8 games, maybe 9. And I think they are good enough, that they could be in the playoff mix come the end of the season. Will they get there or not? I'm not really sure. But they certainly have that potential, but they've got to cease on that first half of the season schedule, and they've got to take advantage of that and feast a little bit.